That's what the town whispered when they saw him walk away with $3 silver lighter and 3 trembling children in his wagon. But nobody knew what those girls carried hidden in their mother's dying gift, a piece of paper that could change everything. The cattle baron with blood on his hands thinks orphans are easy prey. The mountain man with grief in his heart thinks love died with his wife. Neither man knows that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest secrets. And the deepest wounds can birth the fiercest protection. When winter breaks and the hired guns come calling, this broken family will face a choice that could cost them everything they've built together. Can a man who lost everything find the strength to fight for what matters most? And will 3 little girls be enough to heal a heart that's forgotten how to hope? Before we dive into today's story, I'd love to know where you are watching from. Seeing your comments really reminds me why I do this every day. The crisp mountain air nipped at Ezra Blackwood's weathered face as he stood in the pale light of dawn, studying the worn piece of paper in his calloused hands. His supply list was short but vital. 20 pounds of flour, 10 pounds of salt, 3 boxes of ammunition, dried beans, and other provisions to see him through the harsh winter months ahead. The cabin's rough-hewn door creaked behind him, a sound that echoed in the emptiness of his solitary home. Inside, the morning sun filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows across the simple wooden table where Sarah used to serve their meals. Ezra's eyes drifted to the corner where her rocking chair sat silent, memories of her gentle humming while nursing their infant daughter rising unbidden in his mind. 3 winters had passed since fever had taken them both, but the pain remained as fresh as yesterday's wounds. "Best get moving," he muttered to himself, his voice rough from disuse. The sound of his own words startled him, a reminder of how long it had been since he'd spoken to another soul. Ezra methodically loaded his pack mule, checking each rope and knot with the precision that had kept him alive in these mountains for decades. The leather creaked as he adjusted the straps, the familiar motions a comfort in their routine. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding, waited patiently as Ezra secured his rifle in its scabbard. The descent from his cabin began just as the sun cleared the eastern peaks. Ezra knew every twist and turn of the trail to Pine Ridge, every treacherous slope and loose stone. The path wound down through stands of aspen trees, their leaves just beginning to turn gold with autumn's touch. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead, its lonely cry matching the emptiness in his heart. The day stretched on as Ezra guided his animals down the mountain. He passed familiar landmarks, the lightning-struck pine that marked the halfway point, the 3-pronged rock formation that meant water was near. He saw fresh elk tracks crossing the trail but paid them little mind. These days, he only hunted what he needed to survive. The afternoon sun cast long shadows when Ezra finally made camp beside a clear running creek. He worked with practiced efficiency, unsaddling the animals and setting up his simple camp. A small fire soon crackled, the flames reflecting off the water as he stirred a pot of beans. The evening settled around him like a heavy blanket. Coyotes called in the distance, their voices carrying across the valleys he'd left behind. Ezra sat beside his fire, the tin plate balanced on his knee barely touched. His hands, strong from years of trapping and survival, trembled slightly as he reached into his shirt pocket. The daguerreotype was wrapped carefully in a soft piece of cloth. Ezra unfolded it slowly, revealing the precious image beneath. Sarah's face smiled up at him, her eyes bright with joy as she held their tiny daughter. The firelight caught the silver surface, making the image seem to move for just a moment. "Lord," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the creek's gentle murmur, "watch over them till I join them." He paused, throat tight with emotion. "And give me strength to keep going, though I don't rightly know why anymore." The stars emerged one by one above him, the same stars that had witnessed his grief night after night for 3 long years. Ezra carefully rewrapped the daguerreotype and tucked it away, close to his heart where it always stayed. He laid out his bedroll, every movement speaking of the bone-deep loneliness that had become his constant companion. As he settled in for the night, the fire burning low, Ezra pulled his blanket tight against the mountain chill. The creek's steady voice sang him to sleep, its ancient song a reminder that some things endured, even when everything else was lost. The first rays of sunlight painted the mountain peaks in shades of amber as Ezra broke camp. Dew sparkled on his saddle leather while he secured his gear with practiced motions. The morning air held the crisp bite of autumn, warning of the harsh winter that would soon grip these heights. By mid-morning, the familiar sight of Pine Ridge emerged from the rolling foothills. Smoke rose from chimneys in lazy spirals, and the clang of the blacksmith's hammer echoed across the dusty main street. Ezra guided his horse and pack mule past weather-worn buildings, noting the usual bustle of frontier life. Cowboys leading fresh broke horses, miners with coal-stained faces heading to the saloon, and farmers haggling over the price of feed. Henderson's trading post stood at the heart of town, its wooden facade weathered by countless seasons. Ezra tied his animals securely to the hitching post, his fingers automatically checking the knots. The bell above the door jangled as he stepped inside, the familiar scents of leather, tobacco, and coffee beans filling his nostrils. Bill Henderson looked up from his ledger, his round spectacles catching the light from the window. "Morning, Blackwood," he said with a practiced merchant's smile. Ezra responded with a curt nod, already moving through the store's narrow aisles. He pulled his supply list from his coat pocket, focusing on the task at hand. 20 pounds of flour, 10 pounds of salt, 3 boxes of ammunition. His eyes scanned the shelves methodically while he gathered his supplies. The sound of raised voices from outside drew his attention. Curious murmurs and the shuffle of boots on wooden planks filtered through the store's dusty windows. Ezra paused, a tin of coffee in his weathered hand, and looked toward the commotion. Through the glass, he saw a crowd gathering around a shabby wagon that hadn't been there minutes before. The vehicle's wooden sides were warped and gray, the canvas top patched in several places. Something about the scene made his skin prickle with unease. Despite his usual tendency to avoid town gatherings, Ezra found himself moving toward the door. The bell jangled again as he stepped onto the boardwalk, his boots heavy on the worn planks. The sight before him made his breath catch in his throat. 3 small figures sat perfectly still on wooden crates beside the wagon, each child's head covered by a crude burlap sack. Their shoulders were thin beneath threadbare dresses, hands folded quietly in their laps, as if they'd been trained to maintain this unnatural stillness. A man stood beside them, his appearance as unwholesome as his purpose. Silas Crow wore a stained vest over a yellowed shirt, his greasy hair slicked back beneath a battered hat. His eyes held the cold calculation of a snake sizing up its prey. Behind the children, a hand-painted sign proclaimed their fate in stark letters. 3 orphans, $3. "Step right up, good people of Pine Ridge." Crow's voice oozed false cheer as he gestured toward the silent children. A rare opportunity for those seeking helpful hands. These girls are well-behaved and suitable for any kind of work. He patted the nearest child's shoulder, and Ezra noticed how she flinched ever so slightly beneath the sack. Strong backs, quick learners, and no troublesome relations to come calling. The gathered townspeople shifted uncomfortably. Some watched with undisguised interest, calculating the value of free labor against the cost of another mouth to feed. Others turned away, unwilling to meet the hollow gazes of their neighbors. A few whispered behind raised hands, but none stepped forward to challenge the grotesque display. Ezra's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The casual cruelty of the scene struck him like a physical blow, reminding him of his own lost child. These girls sat as still as statues, trained by what horrors he could only imagine, while Crow continued his sales pitch with the enthusiasm of a man selling farm equipment rather than human souls. The afternoon sun beat down on Pine Ridge's main street as the crowd shifted and murmured around Crow's wagon. Several townspeople turned away, their faces twisted with disgust. Martha Wilson, the preacher's wife, clutched her shawl tight, and hurried past, her eyes fixed firmly on the ground. Others lingered at the edges of the gathering, whispering behind raised hands. "Ain't natural selling children like cattle," muttered old Tom from the livery stable, spitting into the dust before walking away. But some drew closer, their expressions calculating. Ezra recognized Jacob Fletcher, the mine owner, studying the girls with unsettling interest. Fletcher's reputation for working his laborers half to death was well known throughout the territory. "How old's the biggest one?" Fletcher called out, jerking his chin toward the tallest girl. Crow's face split into an oily grin. "This fine specimen?" He grabbed the girl's arm roughly, yanking her to her feet. "Stand up straight, girl. Show the gentleman your worth." A soft whimper escaped from beneath the burlap sack, the sound so small and wounded it struck Ezra like a physical blow. His mind flashed to another time, another place. His baby daughter's cry in the night, Sarah's gentle voice soothing their child with a lullaby. His weathered hands clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles white with barely contained rage. "Reckon she's 12 or thereabouts," Crow continued, shaking the girl slightly. "Strong enough for proper work, that's certain sure." $3 seems steep for one child, Fletcher countered, let alone 3. "What if I just take the oldest?" The other two girls shifted almost imperceptibly on their crates, their covered heads turning toward their sister. Even through the crude sacks, their distress was palpable. "Now see here," Crow's voice took on an edge of irritation. "This here's a package deal. 3 healthy girls, trained up proper and obedient like. Why, that's a bargain at twice the price." More potential buyers drifted forward, emboldened by Fletcher's interest. The widow Hanson spoke up from the back of the crowd. "I could use help with my washing business. Maybe take the littlest one." "No, no, no." Crow's face flushed red with growing agitation. "I ain't separating them just to suit you miserly folk. $3 for the lot, or I'll move on to the next town. Plenty of buyers in Silver Creek who'd jump at this opportunity." The sun continued its westward crawl, casting long shadows across the dusty street. Ezra stood rooted to the spot, his chest tight with an unfamiliar pressure. For 3 years, he'd kept to himself, avoiding any involvement in others' troubles. His cabin high in the mountains had been refuge enough, his solitude a shield against further pain. But watching these 3 small figures, so still and silent in their misery, something stirred in his heart, something he hadn't felt since Sarah's death, a calling, clear as mountain spring water that wouldn't be denied. The crowd's haggling continued around him, their voices growing louder as they argued over the fate of 3 innocent souls. Ezra's fingers flexed and curled at his sides as he wrestled with himself. Every instinct honed by years of isolation urged him to walk away, to return to his supplies and his solitary life. Yet he couldn't move. The memory of Sarah's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, reminding him of the man he'd once been, the man she'd believed in, the man who'd made promises before God to protect and cherish his family. The lengthening shadows stretched across Pine Ridge's main street like dark fingers reaching for the gathered crowd. Ezra stood frozen, his weathered face a mask of internal conflict. Sarah's voice, as clear as spring water, echoed through his memories. "Ezra. When God puts something in your path, it's not by accident." Those words, spoken so often during their life together, had guided him through many difficult choices. His wife had always seen God's hand in life's unexpected turns. Even on her deathbed, holding their fever-stricken baby, she'd whispered about heaven's mysterious ways. Now, watching these 3 small figures trembling beneath their burlap prisons, Ezra felt the weight of divine purpose pressing down upon his shoulders. Without conscious thought, his boots began moving through the packed dirt of the street. The crowd parted before him like water around a boulder, conversations dying mid-sentence as the normally reclusive mountain man pushed forward. Even Fletcher stepped back, surprise evident on his face as Ezra's broad frame cast a shadow over Crow's makeshift sales table. Ezra's hands shook slightly as he reached into his coat pocket, but his voice rang steady and clear across the hushed street. 3 silver dollars clattered onto the rough wooden surface, the sound sharp as gunshots in the sudden silence. "I'll take all 3, he declared, the words carrying to every ear in the crowd. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers, followed by urgent whispers. Old Tom stopped mid-stride, turning back to witness this unexpected development. Martha Wilson crossed herself, her lips moving in silent prayer. Crow's beady eyes lit up with undisguised greed. He snatched up the coins before anyone could object, testing each one with his yellowed teeth before tucking them into his vest pocket. With a flourish, he produced a crumpled piece of paper from his coat. "Bill of ownership, all proper and legal-like," Crow announced, though the document's stains and wrinkles suggested otherwise. His pen scratched across the paper as he added hasty notes. "All 3 girls, sold and delivered to." He paused, squinting at Ezra expectantly. "Blackwood," Ezra supplied quietly. "Ezra Blackwood." The transaction complete, Ezra turned toward the 3 silent figures on their wooden crates. His movements became deliberately slow and gentle, like approaching spooked deer. The tallest girl flinched as his shadow fell across her, but held still, trained by fear to endure whatever came next. "Easy now," he murmured, his gruff voice softening to a tender rumble. "I ain't gonna hurt you." With careful fingers, he lifted the first burlap sack, revealing a face that caught his breath in his throat. High cheekbones and deep brown eyes spoke of Cherokee heritage, as did the intricate braiding pattern woven through her tangled black hair. Fear and defiance warred in her expression as she blinked in the sudden light. The second girl's face emerged from beneath her covering, so similar to her sister's that they might have been twins, though she appeared slightly younger. Tears had left clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. When Ezra removed the last sack, the youngest sister's face confirmed what he'd suspected. All 3 bore the beautiful features of their mixed heritage, though dirt and fear had done their best to mask it. Their hair, despite weeks of neglect, still showed traces of traditional Cherokee braiding patterns that spoke of a mother's loving care. "You're safe now," Ezra whispered, his heart aching at the terror in their eyes. "No one's going to hurt you anymore." The words felt strange in his mouth, unused as he was to speaking comfort after so many years alone. But as he looked at these 3 frightened children, he knew with bone-deep certainty that Sarah had been right. God had indeed put something in his path today, and for the first time in 3 years, Ezra Blackwood felt the stirring of purpose in his soul. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Pine Ridge's main street as Ezra knelt before the wooden crates. The 3 sisters remained perfectly still, as if movement itself might bring punishment. Their thin shoulders pressed together, seeking comfort in their closeness. "We need to get you down from there," Ezra said softly, keeping his voice steady and gentle. "Reckon you must be tired of standing." The eldest girl, he guessed her to be about 10, shifted slightly, positioning herself between Ezra and her sisters. Her dark eyes watched his every movement with sharp intelligence, measuring his intentions. Despite her obvious fear, there was steel in her spine and fierce protection in her stance. The middle sister, perhaps 8 years old, clutched a small cloth bundle to her chest, like it contained all the treasure in the world. Her fingers worked nervously at the worn fabric, but she never loosened her grip. The youngest, no more than 6, peered around her eldest sister's shoulder with a mixture of terror and cautious curiosity in her wide eyes. "My wagon's just over there," Ezra continued, gesturing slowly to avoid startling them. "Got some fresh water and bread if you're hungry." He deliberately avoided looking directly at them, remembering how Sarah had taught him to approach injured deer, sideways and soft, letting them come to trust in their own time. None of the girls spoke, but the eldest finally nodded almost imperceptibly. Ezra stepped back, giving them space as they carefully climbed down from their perches. They moved as one unit, the older girl keeping her arms spread slightly to shield her sisters. As Ezra loaded his newly purchased supplies into his wagon, he maintained a quiet, gentle monologue. Trail up to my cabin's about a day's ride. Pretty country up there. Lots of wildflowers still blooming. Got a creek nearby, clean and sweet. He kept his movements deliberate and calm, hoping his steady voice might help ease their obvious trauma. The sound of raised voices near the saloon caught his attention. He recognized Thaddeus Morse, the town banker, speaking with Victor Harrington, the cattle baron, whose spread dominated the valley below Pine Ridge. Their words carried clearly in the cooling air. "Those half-breed Cherokee girls have to be found," Harrington was saying, his cultured voice carrying an edge of frustration. "Their mother left them legal claim to that Silver Creek grazing land. Every day they're alive is another day that property's tied up." Morse's response was quieter but equally concerning. Running Deer was clever, getting those documents filed before the consumption took her, but there are ways around such complications. "Find them," Harrington commanded. "Whatever it takes. I won't let 3 Indian brats stop me from controlling that water rights." Ezra's blood ran cold as understanding dawned. These weren't just orphans he'd rescued. They were valuable targets. Their very existence threatened powerful men's plans for the territory's richest grazing land. He glanced at the 3 silent figures huddled near his wagon, their faces still marked by dust and fear, and realized with grim certainty that his impulsive act of mercy had placed them all in deadly danger. The sun hung low on the horizon as Ezra hastily secured the last of his supplies. His weathered hands worked quickly at the ropes, his mind churning over the conversation he'd overheard. Running Deer. That had been their mother's name. Dead of consumption these past 6 months, leaving behind documents that could challenge Harrington's iron grip on Silver Creek's water rights. "Up you go, little ones," he murmured, helping each girl into the wagon bed. They moved with practiced coordination, the eldest creating a protective barrier between her sisters and the world. He'd spread clean blankets over the supplies, making a secure nest among the flour sacks and winter provisions. The wagon wheels creaked as they left Pine Ridge behind, heading toward the mountain trails that led to his cabin. Ezra kept glancing back, watching for any sign of pursuit. The girls remained absolutely silent. A silence born of harsh lessons, he suspected. Their small bodies swayed with the wagon's movement, but they maintained their tight formation, 3 pairs of dark eyes watching everything. When they reached Cedar Creek, as twilight deepened, Ezra pulled the wagon to a stop. "Need to rest the horses," he explained softly. "Reckon you might be hungry too?" He helped them down, noting how they immediately pressed together beneath a cottonwood tree. From his supplies he pulled out jerky and hardtack, offering it with open palms. The eldest girl studied him for a long moment before reaching out. "I'm Mary," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She broke the hardtack into careful pieces, sharing with her sisters. "This is Hope." The middle sister clutched her mysterious cloth bundle with one hand while accepting food with the other. "And Faith." The youngest took her piece with trembling fingers, her eyes never leaving Ezra's face. Darkness settled fully around them as they finished their simple meal. Ezra studied the steep trail ahead, knowing it would be foolish to attempt those switchbacks at night with such precious cargo. "We'll camp here," he decided. "Start fresh at first light." He built a small fire, keeping it low to avoid drawing attention. The girls watched his every move as he spread his bedroll near the flames. "It's yours for the night," he told them, stepping back to give them space. They hesitated only briefly before huddling together on the blankets, their bodies curled protectively around each other like wolf pups in a den. Ezra settled himself against a fallen log, prepared to keep watch through the night. As cricket song filled the darkness, he heard soft whispers from their direction. Hope's voice rose and fell in melodic Cherokee words. Prayers, he realized, passed down from their mother. The ancient language carried such longing, such loss, that it made his throat tight. These weren't just orphans he'd rescued. They were children torn from their culture, their heritage, their very identity. He watched the firelight play across their faces, seeing shadows of running deer in their high cheekbones and straight black hair. What other pieces of their mother's wisdom, her traditions, her stories, had they managed to hold on to through their ordeal? And how could he, a white mountain man who'd failed to protect his own family, help preserve what remained of their Cherokee heritage? Frost sparkled on the wagon canvas as dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and golds. Ezra moved quietly around their camp, stoking the banked fire back to life. His boots crunched on frozen grass as he prepared a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush, the familiar routine feeling different with 3 small souls depending on him. The girls stirred slowly beneath their shared blankets, bodies stiff from sleep and lingering exhaustion. Little Faith's eyes opened first, watching him with cautious curiosity as he worked. When he offered her a tin cup of coffee liberally sweetened with molasses, a tiny smile flickered across her face, the first he'd seen. "Careful now, it's hot," he warned gently. She wrapped both hands around the warm cup, savoring its sweetness. The mountain trails proved challenging as they began their ascent. The loaded wagon creaked and swayed, forcing Ezra to guide his mule team carefully around jutting rocks and steep drops. During their frequent rest stops, he found himself pointing out essential landmarks and safety markers. "See that lightning-struck pine?" He gestured toward a skeletal tree. "That means we're halfway up, and those dark clouds gathering. Mountain weather changes fast. Best to know the signs." Mary's rigid posture gradually softened as she absorbed his lessons, her quick mind clearly cataloging everything. "How far to your cabin?" she finally asked, her voice stronger than before. "About 4 more hours, if the trail stays clear," he answered, noting how Hope had wandered to examine a patch of yarrow growing beside the trail. "Mother used this for fever," Hope murmured, touching the feathery leaves with gentle fingers. Her knowledge of healing plants clearly ran deep, passed down through generations of Cherokee wisdom. The sun hung low when they finally crested the last rise. Ezra's cabin stood solid against the mountainside, though the garden plot Sarah had so lovingly tended had grown wild with neglect. He watched the girls' faces as they took in their first sight of a real home after months of hardship, wonder mixed with disbelief in their expressions, hope warring with hard-learned distrust. "Welcome home," he said softly, helping them down from the wagon. Inside the cabin's single room stood exactly as he'd left it. The stone fireplace dominated one wall, his wide bed tucked into the corner. Sarah's dried wildflowers still decorated the rough-hewn shelves, alongside his few precious books. The table and chairs they'd built together waited patiently for a family to gather round again. As evening settled in, Ezra busied himself preparing their first proper meal, a thick stew with dried beef and the last of summer's preserved vegetables. The girls explored their new sanctuary with careful steps, touching the solid logs, examining the neat stitching on the quilts, studying the pressed flowers that Sarah had so carefully preserved between pages of his surveying journal. Their wondering eyes told him everything. After months of uncertainty and fear, they'd found a place that might, with time and trust, become home. The evening settled around them like a warm blanket as Ezra stirred the pot of venison stew hanging over the fireplace. The rich aroma filled the cabin, drawing the girls closer despite their lingering wariness. He had crumbled fresh cornbread into 3 wooden bowls, remembering how Sarah used to say good food could heal more than just hunger. "Reckon you all must be mighty hungry," he said softly, passing out the bowls. The girls accepted them with trembling hands, but their eyes widened at the sight of real food. They sat cross-legged near the fire, close enough to feel its warmth, but far enough to watch Ezra carefully. As they ate, fragments of their story emerged in whispered pieces. Mary spoke first, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "Mama got sick last winter. The coughing wouldn't stop." She paused, protective arms around her sisters. After she went to sleep and didn't wake up, they split us up. Different houses, Hope added, clutching her mysterious bundle tighter. Bad houses. Then the carnival man found us, Mary continued, her young face hardening at the memory. Said he'd keep us together if we did what he said. Ezra's heart ached as he learned more. The girls hadn't seen the inside of a schoolhouse in months, though Mary could read simple words. But their eyes lit up when speaking of their mother's teachings. The healing plants, the Cherokee words for seasons, the proper times for gathering medicine. Mama showed us how to find yarrow for bleeding, Hope explained, showing her first real animation, and which berries are safe in summer. As night deepened, practical matters demanded attention. Ezra surveyed his bachelor cabin with new eyes, seeing all it lacked for 3 small girls. He gathered extra quilts and blankets, creating soft pallets near the fireplace. From his trunk, he pulled clean shirts that would serve as nightgowns. "There's fresh water in the bucket for washing," he said, setting out his one precious bar of soap. "Tomorrow we'll figure out proper clothes and such." The girls changed behind a blanket he hung for privacy, emerging in his oversized shirts that reached their ankles. As they settled onto their makeshift beds, Mary's voice cut through the darkness. "Are you—" She hesitated, fear threading through her words. "Are you going to sell us tomorrow?" Ezra moved closer, kneeling beside their pallets. The firelight caught the tears in their eyes, the tension in their small bodies ready to flee. "Listen close now," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're my family now, and family don't sell family. That's a promise." Something shifted in Mary's face, a tiny crack in the wall of fear she'd built. Faith reached out and touched his rough hand with her tiny one, while Hope released a shaky breath. They slept that night in the circle of firelight. The girls huddled together on their pallets, Ezra in his chair by the door. Though his body rested, his ears stayed sharp for any sound of approaching horses from town, but only the night wind and distant owl calls disturbed the peace of their first night as a family. The mountain dawn painted the cabin windows with pale gold when Ezra stirred from his watchful rest in the chair. His breath caught at an unexpected sight. Little Faith had somehow crept from her sister's pallet to his bedroll during the night. Her tiny hand rested on his arm, fingers curled trustingly against his sleeve. The touch sent a wave of emotion through his chest, memories of his own baby girl's innocent grasp mixing with fresh wonder at this new chance at fatherhood. After a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush sweetened with the last of his molasses, Ezra began teaching the essentials of mountain living. "Always check twice that the water barrel's full," he explained, demonstrating how to work the pump handle. "Winter storms can leave you stuck inside for days." Mary threw herself into every task, her quick mind absorbing instructions about woodpile management and food storage. "Like this?" she asked, stacking kindling exactly as he showed her, pride brightening her eyes at his approving nod. Hope drifted toward the cabin's herb garden, overgrown but still producing. "Mama called this Ogonata Liga," she said softly, touching wild ginger leaves, "for stomach pain and bad dreams." Her knowledge of healing plants matched Ezra's own wilderness experience, creating a bridge between their cultures. Faith followed them all like a devoted puppy, her silence gradually giving way to curiosity. "Why do chipmunks make that sound?" she asked during their water-hauling trip, her voice small but clear. Later, watching clouds build over the peaks, "Where do they come from?" Ezra answered each question patiently, marveling at how naturally teaching came when it sprang from love rather than duty. As afternoon shadows lengthened, he gathered them for their first lesson. Using charcoal on flat stones, he showed them how to form letters while reading from his worn Bible. "This here's an A," he explained, helping Faith trace the shape. "Stands for angel, like your mama watching over you." The evening meal brought another kind of learning as the girls shared more of their Cherokee heritage. Hope explained how her mother taught her to gather plants by the moon's phases, while Mary described Thanksgiving ceremonies that honored each season's gifts. We say selu for corn, Hope demonstrated, carefully pronouncing the word, and gadu for bread. Ezra listened intently, honoring their mother's teachings with quiet respect. The cabin felt different now, warmer somehow, as if the walls themselves were embracing this blend of cultures and hearts, learning to trust again. As they settled for sleep, the fire's glow illuminated 4 faces softened by the day's shared experiences. Where once stood a lonely man's retreat, now grew the first tender shoots of family, nourished by mutual teaching and learning that began healing their wounded hearts. The mountain seasons turned like pages in nature's book, each day adding another chapter to their growing family story. Ezra's hands, once idle during long evenings alone, now stayed busy crafting proper beds for the girls. He shaped pine boards with careful attention, remembering skills learned while building a cradle 3 winters past. Mary helped him sand the rough edges smooth, her determined focus matching his own. "Reckon these'll be more comfortable than floor pallets," Ezra said, positioning the sturdy frames against the cabin's west wall. Hope and Faith bounced experimentally on their new mattresses, stuffed with fresh sweetgrass and spare wool batting. Near the stone fireplace, makeshift desks took shape from rescued crates and planks. "Every child needs a proper place to learn," Ezra explained, thinking of Sarah's passion for education. The girls arranged their slates and charcoal with pride, eager for daily lessons in reading, writing, and sums. Their routine fell into natural rhythms. Mornings began with chores and breakfast, followed by studies where Mary excelled at arithmetic, while Hope showed particular gift for letters. Faith, though younger, absorbed everything with wide-eyed wonder, especially Bible stories about angels and miracles. "Tell us again about Daniel in the lion's den," she would beg, curled trustingly against Ezra's side during evening readings. Her innocent joy cracked open his grief-hardened heart, like spring ice breaking on the creek. Cherokee words and ways wove naturally through their days. Hope taught Ezra plant names as they gathered winter supplies. "Walela for hummingbird," she explained, pointing to the tiny darting visitor in her mother's beloved herb garden. "Mama said they bring messages from loved ones who've passed on." The first snow arrived early, dusting the mountains white overnight. "We must prepare quickly now," Mary said, her voice carrying the wisdom of one who had known hard winters. Together they sealed window gaps with moss, smoked meat for storage, and dried fruits and herbs for winter medicines. During these busy days, stories of their past emerged like shy deer from forest shadows. Father was strong and kind. Mary shared one evening while helping to stack firewood. "He taught us to respect the land and its creatures, but a hunting accident took him when Faith was just walking." Hope's precious bundle of keepsakes held their few physical connections to their parents: their father's carved hunting whistle, their mother's beaded medicine pouch, and a small wooden box containing something the girls kept private. "Mama fought so hard to keep us together," Hope whispered one night, watching early November snow block the mountain passes completely. "She tried to hide her sickness, but the consumption took her anyway." Their isolation became complete as winter settled in earnest around the cabin. Yet within those snug log walls, love grew stronger each day. Evening meals filled with shared stories and laughter. Morning prayers blended Christian and Cherokee traditions, and night brought peaceful sleep unmarred by old fears. In their winter sanctuary, far from those who might harm them, they became more than survivors. They became family. The deepening snow transformed their mountain sanctuary into an island of warmth and love. Drifts piled high against the cabin walls, sealing them in complete isolation that brought not loneliness, but an overwhelming sense of belonging. Their dependence on each other grew stronger with each passing day, weaving their hearts together like the intricate patterns in Hope's basketwork. Morning light would find them gathered by the fire, their prayers rising like smoke to heaven. Hope's clear voice offered Cherokee thanksgiving for Earth's gifts, while Ezra's deeper tones spoke Christian gratitude. The blending of their traditions felt as natural as breathing, each enriching the other with ancient wisdom and fresh faith. Afternoon lessons became treasured time. Ezra's finger traced letters in Mary's primer, pride warming his chest as she sounded out difficult words. Meanwhile, Hope shared her mother's plant knowledge, teaching him to identify healing herbs even when snow covered their distinctive leaves. "This bark tea," she explained one day, sorting dried strips with careful hands, "helps chase away winter coughs and fever dreams." When evening shadows lengthened, stories flowed freely by firelight. Ezra shared tales of frontier life, while Mary recounted Cherokee legends passed down through generations. Little Faith nestled against his side, her small hand often reaching up to touch his beard, as if ensuring he remained real and present. The first time Faith called him Papa Ezra, the words came soft as snowfall during their evening Bible reading. His heart stumbled over its next beat, tears threatening to blur the precious letters before him. Hope picked up the name next, using it naturally when asking for help with her mending. But it was Mary's formal adoption of the title that sealed its significance. "Papa Ezra," she said one morning, standing straight and solemn before him. "That's who you are to us now. Not just our protector, but our father in all the ways that matter." Her declaration carried the weight of Cherokee ceremony, marking a profound shift in their family identity. December arrived with crystalline beauty, inspiring them to prepare for Christmas. They gathered pine boughs to decorate the cabin's interior, their fresh scent mingling with wood smoke. Ezra taught the girls to carve simple wooden ornaments while they shared Cherokee winter blessings that honored the sleeping earth. When Ezra developed a persistent cough mid-month, Hope's knowledge proved invaluable. She prepared healing teas and poultices with quiet confidence, her gentle hands seeming to soothe more than just physical ailments. Under her care, the lingering grief in his soul began to lift like morning mist, replaced by deep contentment. Their Christmas celebration merged both worlds beautifully. Carved ornaments hung beside traditional Cherokee decorations, while carols and tribal winter songs filled the cabin with joy. As 1887 drew to a close, their mountain haven had become more than shelter. It was the home they all needed but never expected to find again. The new year dawned bright and cold, finding them gathered at the cabin's door to welcome 1888. Ezra stood with his daughters, for that's truly what they were now, watching the sun paint the snow-covered peaks with promise. His heart, once frozen with grief, beat strong and warm with renewed purpose and unexpected joy. Hope knelt in the snow near the cabin, her breath forming delicate clouds as she searched for wintergreen beneath the white blanket. Late January's bitter cold had driven most living things into hibernation, but she knew her mother's teachings well. Some medicines thrived even in winter's grip. Her fingers, protected by wool mittens Ezra had fashioned, brushed aside snow to reveal dark green leaves. As she worked, Mary's old dress, now serving as Hope's winter garment, caught on a branch. The fabric pulled tight, drawing her attention to an odd thickness in the seam near her hip. Hope paused her gathering, curiosity piqued by the unusual stitching. Her mother's careful handiwork had always been precise, but this section seemed deliberately different. Running her fingers along the seam, she felt something firm hidden within. "Mary!" she called, excitement rising in her voice. "Come look at this." Her older sister emerged from the cabin, followed by Ezra and Faith. They watched as Hope's careful fingers worked at the hidden stitches. Inside, they discovered a cleverly concealed pocket containing a small leather pouch. "Mama's medicine bag," Mary wondered aloud, but Hope shook her head. The shape was wrong. With trembling hands, she opened the pouch. Inside, wrapped carefully in oiled cloth that had protected it from months of wear, lay a folded document. The yellowed paper bore official territorial government seals and formal handwriting. Ezra took the paper with gentle reverence, his weathered face growing serious as he read. "It's a land deed," he said softly, "properly filed and legal. Your mama, Running Deer, she owned 160 acres along Silver Creek." Mary's eyes widened. "The bottom land? Where the best grazing is?" "The very same," Ezra confirmed, studying the document more closely. This here's as legal as they come. Government issued it as part of some treaty settlements. Makes you 3 girls the rightful owners of some of the most valuable water rights in the territory. Hope clutched Mary's hand. Is that why those men were looking for us? Why Mr. Harrington wanted us found? Ezra's face darkened. Explains everything. Harrington's been buying up all the land along Silver Creek for his cattle operation. This piece, your piece, it's right in the middle of what he wants. But we have the paper now, Faith said hopefully. We can prove it's ours. It ain't that simple, little one. Ezra carefully rewrapped the deed. Men like Harrington, they don't care much for paper laws when money's involved, and they'd think even less of 3 half-Cherokee girls claiming valuable property. He looked at each of them gravely. This paper gives us legal right. True enough. But it also makes you worth... He paused, choosing his words carefully. It makes certain folks desperate enough to do anything to get their hands on it. Mary straightened her spine, showing the strength that had kept her sisters alive through months of hardship. What do we do, Papa Ezra? He tucked the precious document into his shirt, close to his heart. First, we keep this safe. Then we figure out how to protect what's rightfully yours, without getting any of you killed in the process. February's bitter winds howled around Ezra's cabin, but it wasn't the cold that sent a chill down his spine that morning. Fresh tracks in the new-fallen snow told a story that made his heart sink. Boot prints, at least 5 different sizes, and the distinctive marks of shod horses circled the cabin's perimeter. They'd approached under cover of darkness, studied the layout, and withdrawn without attacking. Ezra traced the tracks with trembling fingers, reading the signs like a book written in snow. These weren't random travelers or lost hunters. The careful positioning, the strategic approach paths. These were men who knew their business. His mountain sanctuary, protected for months by winter's fierce grip, had been discovered. Inside the cabin, Mary stirred a pot of morning porridge, while Hope helped Faith practice her letters. The peaceful scene made Ezra's chest tighten. Over the next days, he transformed their home into a fortress without explaining why. He kept his Winchester loaded and close at hand, positioned extra ammunition in strategic spots, and taught the girls emergency escape routes into the deeper mountains. If trouble comes, he instructed them, you run straight up that hidden trail behind the woodpile. Don't look back, don't wait for me, just run. The girls noticed the change in him. Their hard-won sense of security began to crack like spring ice. Faith's nightmares returned, while Mary took to watching the windows with worried eyes. Hope's hands shook as she sorted her healing herbs, organizing them into bundles they could grab quickly if needed. On a frigid February morning, their fears materialized in the form of 5 mounted men approaching the cabin openly. Ezra recognized Jake Cooley leading them, Harrington's ruthless foreman, known for handling his employer's dirtiest work. Just checking on them orphan girls, Cooley announced with a snake's smile as he pushed through the door uninvited. His men crowded the cabin's main room, hands resting too casually near their pistols. The girls huddled behind Ezra, who stood like a mountain between them and danger. Faith clutched his leg while Mary and Hope pressed close to his sides. Funny things happen in these mountains, Cooley drawled, examining Sarah's preserved wildflowers on the shelf, especially to folks who don't belong here. Half-breeds, for instance. Accidents are common in winter. His men chuckled darkly at the threat. One kicked over a stack of books the girls had been reading. Best mind your own business, Blackwood, Cooley continued. Shame if something happened to this cozy setup you got here. We'll be back real soon to check on things again. The threat hung in the air like gun smoke long after they rode away. Ezra stared out the window, watching their tracks disappear into the forest. Their peaceful sanctuary lay shattered, broken by the intrusion of violence and greed. Faith's small hand slipped into his. Are they coming back, Papa Ezra? He squeezed her fingers gently. knowing their time on this mountain had just run out. They needed to move, and soon, if he was going to keep his daughters safe. The mountain knight pressed close around the cabin as Ezra paced the worn floorboards, his footsteps silent from years of hunting practice. Moonlight filtered through frost-covered windows, casting pale shadows across his sleeping daughters. Their rest was fitful, marked by small whimpers and twitching hands that revealed dreams haunted by Cooley's threats. Faith curled into a tight ball beneath her quilt, dried tears still visible on her cheeks. Mary's arm draped protectively over Hope even in sleep, her face set in a worried frown. The sight of them, so vulnerable, yet so precious to him, made Ezra's heart ache with an impossible choice. He could lead them deeper, into the mountains, where his survival skills might keep them alive. But winter at higher elevations showed no mercy, especially to children. Game grew scarce above the tree line, and shelter would be temporary at best. They would become permanent fugitives, always looking over their shoulders, always running. Or he could stand and fight, one man against Harrington's small army of hired guns and bought judges. His trigger finger twitched at the thought, but even his deadly aim couldn't protect 3 little girls from determined men with unlimited resources and no conscience. Dawn painted the cabin walls with pale light as the girls stirred awake. They gathered around him like anxious fawns, their eyes wide with fear of abandonment. "Please don't send us away," Faith whispered, her small fingers clutching his weathered hand. "We'll be so quiet, you won't even know we're here." Mary stood straight-backed, despite her trembling lip. "I promise to be good forever, Papa Ezra. We all will. Just please let us stay with you." Their words pierced his heart deeper than any bullet could. Hope, quiet and thoughtful, as always, spoke last, but with wisdom beyond her years. "Running won't stop them, Papa," she said softly. "They'll keep coming, and the deep mountains are dangerous in winter. We need help." Ezra watched them prepare for bed that evening, knowing it might be their last peaceful night in the only home they'd known since their rescue. Faith said her prayers in mixed Cherokee and English. Mary checked the doors twice, her shoulders tense with responsibility. Hope organized her healing herbs, keeping the most essential ones close. As moonlight once again filled the cabin, Ezra made his decision. The thought of asking for help terrified him more than facing down Harrington's entire crew. He'd lived alone so long, trusted only himself since Sarah's death. But watching his daughters sleep, he knew solitary pride had no place in a father's heart. "Girls," he announced at breakfast, "we're heading to town tomorrow. This isn't something we can face alone." They looked up from their porridge, hope and fear mingling in their expressions, as Ezra began packing supplies for the journey. It wasn't running away, he told himself. It was running towards something stronger than one man's courage. The power of community he'd forgotten existed. The early March wind cut through Ezra's coat as he secured the last bundle to their wagon. 3 months of sanctuary had given them enough time to gather modest belongings, but leaving their mountain home still felt like tearing open a healing wound. Mary stood beside him, straight-backed and solemn, her dress concealing the precious land deed sewn carefully into its seams. The journey proved treacherous. Spring thaw had turned mountain trails into ribbons of mud, forcing them to navigate carefully around deep ruts and slick patches. They made camp the first night in a sheltered grove, all 4 huddling close as strange sounds echoed through the darkness. Ezra kept his rifle ready, watching shadows dance at the edge of their firelight. By late afternoon of the second day, Pine Ridge's church steeple came into view. Ezra's hands tightened on the reins as familiar buildings emerged from the misty distance. The thought of asking for help made his throat tighten, but Faith's small hand patting his arm gave him courage he didn't know he possessed. Reverend Samuel Hayes was tending his garden when they arrived, his empty sleeve pinned neatly against his black coat. The old soldier turned preacher straightened slowly, reading the desperation in Ezra's eyes before a word was spoken. Inside the church's quiet sanctuary, Ezra's story spilled out like spring floodwater. The girls' heritage, the land deed, Harrington's threats. Each revelation deepened the fierce light in the Reverend's eyes. "The church has rooms," Hayes declared, his voice firm with righteous anger. "You'll stay here while we gather support." Dr. Emma Sullivan's examination room smelled of herbs and soap. Her gentle hands checked the girls for fever and winter ailments while her sharp mind cataloged every detail of their condition. "I'll testify to their Cherokee heritage," she promised, her own battles against prejudice evident in her determined expression, "and to the obvious family bonds you share." Their final visit took them to the Territorial Marshal's office, where Captain Miguel Santos listened with growing concern. His dark eyes, so like the girls' own, showed clear understanding of their predicament. "The law must protect all families," he stated, his accent thick with conviction, "not just those with power and money." With each conversation, Ezra felt the walls of his isolation crumbling. Every offered hand of help, every kind word, every promise of support proved that his decision to trust others, though terrifying, had been right. The March sunlight filtered through Pine Ridge Church's stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across Ezra's trembling hands. He stood rigid in the front pew, the three girls beside him in their freshly pressed dresses, their dark hair neatly braided with ribbons Dr. Sullivan had given them. The wooden church walls seemed to close in around him as memories of Sarah's funeral threatened to overwhelm his resolve. Reverend Hayes' steady voice cut through Ezra's rising panic. "Brothers and sisters, today we welcome a man whose courage reminds us of our Christian duty to protect the innocent." The Reverend's empty sleeve rustled as he gestured toward Ezra. "Some of you remember him from darker days. Now he comes seeking our help, not for himself, but for 3 precious souls God has placed in his care." Ezra's boots felt like lead as he approached the simple wooden pulpit. Faith's small hand slipped into his, steadying him as he faced the congregation. The words caught in his throat at first, emerging rough and uncertain. "3 months ago," he began, his voice growing stronger with each word, "I witnessed something evil in our town square. 3 little girls, sold like cattle." The church fell silent as he described the horror of that autumn day, his impulsive rescue, and their transformation from frightened orphans to family. When he spoke of the land deed's discovery and Harrington's threats, angry murmurs rippled through the pews. Ezra unfolded the territorial document with reverent care. "These girls have legal right to their mother's land, but Harrington's men," his voice cracked, "they found our cabin, threatened my daughters." Mary stepped forward, her chin held high as she faced the congregation. Hope and faith flanked her, their united presence speaking louder than words about the family they had become. The silence that followed Ezra's plea felt endless. Then Samuel Turner, the blacksmith, stood up. "My boys and I will help guard your property." Martha Wilson, who ran the boarding house, rose next. "The girls can stay with me when needed." One by one, townspeople stood offering protection, supplies, childcare, and support. Tears blurred Ezra's vision as he watched the miracle of community unfold before him. The mountain man, who had hidden from human contact for 3 years, now stood surrounded by allies, their collective strength forming a shield around his precious new family. The week after Ezra's testimony transformed Pine Ridge into a hive of purposeful activity. Dr. Emma Sullivan and Reverend Hayes departed early Monday morning by stagecoach, carrying the precious land deed and legal documents to the territorial capital. Their mission was clear: establish ironclad protection for the girls' inheritance under both territorial law and federal Cherokee treaty provisions. Meanwhile, Captain Miguel Santos began methodically building a case against Victor Harrington. His investigations revealed a disturbing pattern of similar land grabs targeting vulnerable homesteaders and Indian families. Each documented case added weight to the growing evidence of Harrington's fraudulent empire. Sarah Whitehorse emerged as an unexpected blessing for the girls. The respected Cherokee woman opened her home and heart, teaching them traditional crafts their mother hadn't lived long enough to share. Under her gentle guidance, Mary learned intricate beadwork patterns, while Hope expanded her knowledge of medicinal plants. Little Faith blossomed in the warmth of Sarah's kitchen, learning to make traditional cornbread while absorbing stories of proud Cherokee heritage. The town's support proved both practical and comprehensive. The girls attended school for the first time in months, their teachers showing remarkable patience with their scattered education. Dr. Sullivan provided thorough medical care, treating old injuries and ensuring proper nutrition. The Whitehorse family's ranch offered safe harbor, with Tom Whitehorse's reputation as a skilled marksman providing additional security. When Victor Harrington rode into town that Friday, flanked by twice his usual number of armed men, he expected to find easy prey. Instead, he faced a united community. Merchants closed their doors at his approach. Armed ranchers casually positioned themselves near building corners. Women gathered the children indoors while men lined the street in silent witness. Harrington's practiced intimidation fell flat against this wall of solidarity. His threats about unfortunate accidents and midnight fires drew no fearful responses, only steady stares and resolute silence. Even his most menacing hired guns seemed unsettled by the quiet determination they encountered. Forced to retreat without achieving his goals, Harrington's frustration drove him toward increasingly desperate measures. His usual tactics of bullying and bribes proved useless against Pine Ridge's unified resistance, pushing him toward actions that would soon prove his undoing. Late March winds howled across Pine Ridge as Harrington's desperation reached its breaking point. His legal challenges to the girls' land deed crumbled in the face of overwhelming documentation and united community support. The territorial court had validated every detail of Running Deer's claim, leaving him no legitimate path forward. Under cover of darkness, Harrington's men launched nighttime raids against the Whitehorse Ranch. Shots rang out in the darkness, spooking livestock and shattering windows. But instead of finding helpless victims, the raiders encountered organized resistance. Tom Whitehorse and his neighbors had established round-the-clock protective watches, with armed citizens rotating shifts to guard the family. Captain Santos orchestrated a brilliant trap, allowing Harrington and Jake Cooley enough rope to hang themselves. Hidden witnesses documented their late-night planning sessions, where both men openly discussed eliminating those Indian brats and anyone who stood with them. Their words, recorded by multiple witnesses, provided the final evidence needed for arrest warrants. The territorial court's ruling came down like thunder. Judge Harrison not only upheld the girls' deed to Silver Creek, but also invalidated several of Harrington's suspicious land acquisitions. When Captain Santos stepped forward with documented evidence of conspiracy and attempted murder, Harrington and Cooley found themselves in iron shackles, their empire of intimidation finally crumbling. 6 months later, Silver Creek blossomed under its rightful owner's care. The girls applied their mother's Cherokee wisdom to create flourishing gardens, mixing traditional growing methods with modern techniques. Ezra built them a sturdy 2-story home overlooking the creek, the first house they could truly call their own. His adoption of all 3 girls became official in October, creating a legal family to match the bonds love had already forged. Their first Christmas in the new house glowed with joy and meaning. The entire community gathered to celebrate, from Reverend Hayes to Dr. Sullivan, from the Whitehorses to Captain Santos. Faith climbed carefully onto Ezra's shoulders to place her handmade star atop their Christmas tree, while Hope led everyone in a Cherokee winter blessing ceremony that flowed naturally into traditional carols. As evening snow dusted the windows, Ezra watched his daughters sharing treats with their guests. Mary helped younger children string popcorn garlands, Hope distributed her special wintergreen tea, and Faith's laughter rang through the warm rooms. His whispered prayer of gratitude acknowledged the miracle. Love had created exactly the family God intended all along. If this one resonated with you, stick around. I've got another story waiting for you tomorrow. And who knows, it might be just what you needed to hear.